Library services, gaining cadetship with the Queensland Radium Institute. She began studying for an arts degree part-time, majoring in English and history, and went on to complete a doctorate on expatriate women in PNG from the first missionaries until World War I. After submitting her thesis and waiting for the results, she began working on the history of the UQ Physics Department with Professor John Mainstone. Her research took her to the archives of Brisbane General Hospital and the work of Dr Hugh Webster, a physicist with the famed Cavendish laboratories who contributed to the setting up of both facilities. She has worked as a part-time lecturer at QUT, the University of Sunshine Coast and Griffith University. She has written history of the law firm Clayton Nuts, which was published and later updated and reprinted. During her academic career, she has presented a number of academic papers that mainly dealt with some issues on Papua New Guinea or her keen interest in women's stories. She says she is blessed with 4 children and 7 grandsons. I'd like to invite Dr Sue Keays to come forward and share with us some of her insights into the Southern Cross Care history book. Please make Dr Keays welcome.
Firstly, I think I'm a bit short. I'd like to thank Francis for that wonderful analysis of the book. So I think I can say good evening, friends, because it's getting a bit late in the night to be formal. Firstly, I'd like to congratulate the Queensland Knights of the Southern Cross on their centenary year from 1921 to 2021. 100 years is a great accomplishment in our rapidly changing world, and there's no doubt about that. When I started working on this history, it was a bit longer than I like to think, and I just caught up with Peter Bell, so you can have a guess when it first started. I knew nothing at all about the Knights of Southern Cross. I knew nothing at all about Southern Cross Care Queensland, and I knew just about nothing at all about aged care. So I didn't seem to be a very good choice to be the historian. My own experience of aged care began when my mother and then my mother-in-law both became afflicted with Alzheimer's and were admitted to care. And they were very sad times for our family. However, this journey has taught me a great deal about aged care with an emphasis on care, both physical and spiritual. When I was invited to the blessing and opening of Park Vista 1 in 2017, which was sort of my introduction to Southern Cross Care, I was really impressed the way the staff just immediately got up and rushed to help people who were coming down to the service and helping them into a chair or getting comfortable on their walker. And there was nobody there to sort of prompt them and tell them. And that sort of taught me a lot about Southern Cross Care, that people cared about the jobs they were doing and they cared about their residents. It wasn't long too when the residents, and they're all ladies, started chatting to me and telling me about how much they loved their new life at Jurong Village. And through my own personal journey, and indeed writing this book has been a personal journey for me, I've greatly come to respect the Catholic ethos and Catholic views on social justice and the sanctity of human life. It's something that will stay with me for the rest of my life. After just a little while working on the history, the name of the book came to me. And the name's been raised a couple of times by other speakers tonight. And the name, of course, is First Things First, Valuing and Respecting Human Life. The title is an amalgam of 2 expressions that I saw as crucial to the birth and development of Southern Cross Care and its promise to the residents. First Things First is borrowed from the words of Archbishop James Dewey, who in 1921, and the name, of course, is the same time that the Knights started up in Queensland. James Dewey, amongst other matters, referred to the critical need for sisters to care for elderly people in distress. He went on to get in touch with the Poor Sisters of Nazareth and bought a property for them to start an aged care home at Wynnum. But later on, the same words were used by Senator Dame Margaret Guilfoyle in opening Dewey Court in February 1979. The second part of the title, Valuing and Respecting Human Life, was derived from words by Terry Bennett, who did a lot of work with ethics for Southern Cross Care. And it's also, I think, underpinned by the Knights' own creed of service and Christianity, or maybe Christianity and service. In doing some research, we found there was some confusion with the order of those words. The book's a complex history. I've been told, it's a tome. It encompasses many, many areas. There was a need to document the events that led to the growth and development of the organisation and its facilities and retirement villages over 40 years. This sort of hadn't been done. In writing first things first, I thought about the readers, because this to me is the way you should structure anything you're doing. Who's going to read it? And I thought the KSC members will probably be interesting. Southern Cross Care's board members and staff, members of Southern Cross Care's community, including the Archdiocese Development Fund, the residents, of course, and their families, and just generally people who may be interested in aged care, because I think the journey of aged care through the years at Southern Cross Care is a really good example of how you can look after people really well. As a result, and much to the concern of the editorial committee, the book has grown longer than anticipated. When I was chatting to Peter a little bit earlier, we said we should have published the book in 2000 and this could be volume 2. But it comprises 4 linked sections. It begins with an introduction to the Knights of the Southern Cross. I mean, obviously, all of you here today are familiar with them, but other readers might not be. And it highlights the members' absolute determination to care for the elderly people that they'd identified as being in greatest need of care. Next is the inspiring story of the Homes organisation, which metamorphosised as Southern Cross Homes for the Aged and now Southern Cross Care. And you wouldn't believe how much trouble our editorial committee had dealing with all of these names, but they're one and the same, Southern Cross Care today. Our focus, of course, was Queensland and how the members overcame the problems they encountered prior to building the original Dewey Court at Holland Park. Even this surprised my husband, who had decided he should read the book after 4 years or something and has read it all in the last 4 days. He was quite surprised to learn about these problems and how they were confronted one by one and slowly overcome. Thinking about this led to a very fearsome word for the Knights at the time, and that word was finances, or the lack thereof, and how the funds were raised to build an aged care hostel. In those early years, much was contributed from the Knights' own pockets, and they were incredibly generous, from their labour, from their physical labour, and from their fundraising efforts. There's no doubt that Dewey Court and Archbishop Dewey Nursing Home stood as tributes to their determination to care for elderly people. Our thoughts then, when I say our, I'm thinking about the editorial committee, then turned to the management of Southern Cross Homes. Few of the pioneer board members had any practical knowledge of aged care, and this was mentioned earlier by Francis, and what they actually needed to care for elderly residents. This was all a new field that they were going into. They had much to learn about, particularly the ever-changing matrix of government funding. It was not an easy path, and that's an understatement. But despite the problems and reverses of those years, the organisation grew and flourished. And the new millennium saw it was a rebirth for Southern Cross Care. And the organisation expanded very rapidly into the area of retirement villages. It acquired its first rural facilities, and then it embarked on community services. So that's a real turning point for Southern Cross Care. Eden's Landing, which has been mentioned here, was built near Beenleigh in the 1990s. That was the first of Southern Cross Care's 5 retirement villages. In 2010, the board made the momentous decision to demolish the ageing facilities, and Alf Rowan had a lot to do with that. Unfortunately, Alf's not here today. And they plan to build a multi-storey residential facility on the same site at Holland Park. And this was a big leap in the future, because this wasn't done before. This was the first high-rise residential aged care facility in Brisbane. And the board went to enormous research to try and figure out if people were interested in actually buying a unit that was high-rise. And today the village is co-located with its very stylish Park Vista retirements, and some of the residents there have written for our book, so you can see that they're a very happy group of residents. And moving on, I wanted to pay due respect to the staff members who care for the residents. Sometimes I think they're overlooked a bit, but these are the people who look after the residents. You know, they care for them, they make sure they get their medicines, they get their food, they get things to do. They also, some of them oversee the retirement villages, not so many, and some work in the very busy support centre of Upper Mount Gravatt. Southern Cross Care is a very large organisation, as you've seen. It employs over 1,000 staff today, and it was soon apparent I couldn't do justice to all of them. And I wondered, have I got, a representative sample? Am I missing out someone? Because I really wanted to I wanted to thank the staff and to document that in the book. The examples I've used are representative of just the many dedicated people working at the facilities. Over the past few years, aged care suffered from the very negative findings of the Royal Commission, you of course will know this, and all throughout the COVID crisis. But there's no doubt Southern Cross Care has wonderful staff members. As Peter Bell, who's here tonight, a former CEO, pointed out, you never hear the positive stories, but you'll read them in the book, there's no doubt about that. Each year at an annual dinner, Southern Cross Care recognises the staff members who exhibit leadership qualities, dedication, and perform above and beyond expectation. And those evenings are so inspiring, just to see the staff and to hear what they do. My own favourite chapters deal with the interaction of staff and residents. I found this was the easiest part to write for the book, and I enjoyed hearing about that interaction. And I soon learnt that the residents are not passive recipients of care, but together they give each facility a character of its own. So lastly, and most importantly, I'd like to acknowledge the assistance and guidance of the editorial committee, comprising David Jeffries, who deservedly won a Night of Honour tonight, Michael Gregg, who was sitting over near me, and he was comparing earlier today, and Pat Nolan, who did all the figures and finances for me, because that's not my strong point, and Dr Terry Bennett, who's not here tonight, and I found his words of compassion just compelling, and you'll find some of those are quoted in the book. I also had the help from Maureen Bailey, who's Southern Cross Care's archivist, and a very humble person who doesn't want to be mentioned, but I owe her a lot. And Stuart Bevis, we started this project. Stuart couldn't continue, but we had the most fascinating discussions when he used to drive me out to Mount Gravatt and home from our many meetings. I'm also thankful to the information and help I've got from Alf Rowan and Michael Hill, who did a lot of gave us a lot of information about the fates, about the current board members, many of whom have written things that you can read in the book. Meredith Hall, who provided a lot of dates and things for us to verify, and all of them have contributed a lot to this book. And our thanks are also due to Don Neander, Michael Hart, Peter Bell and Jason Eldring for their ongoing support for the book. Without that help, it probably wouldn't have been finished. Particularly David's work, I think. He cracked the whip and made sure that we got together and we did finish the book that we set out to write. So when you read the book, as I hope you do, I'd like just to mention a couple of things. Just think about it as 4 sections. Just focus on one section at a time. Don't try to read the lot at once. Many of us have little understanding of aged care, both in terms of the government responsibilities and how the facilities are run. Southern Cross Care is an unexpectedly modern organisation. At first I thought this is a contradiction in terms. Southern Cross Care looks after elderly people, and I was thinking from what I'd experienced before that it must be a bit of a stuffy old organisation, and that is entirely wrong. I was privileged to be able to enter this world for a short time and learn about what contemporary aged care can offer. Jason Eldring wrote the epilogue for the book, and I think my husband particularly enjoyed it. It just tied all the bits together for him. And in conclusion, I'd like to mention Southern Cross Care's newly introduced cultural initiative called Known and Loved. It's designed to create a home and a workplace where people feel cherished, welcome and secure, and that to me sums up the spirit of Southern Cross Care. So thank you very much, and I hope you do read the book.
Thanks so much, Sue. I'll be honest.